host, Alex Garrett.
Thank you, Dad. That's my stepdad, Victor Furman. And this is another edition of the Alex Garrett Podcast Network. I've been meaning to talk about something that has me riled up in this city because, hey, if you make more than the average New Yorker, they're going to say, hey, your parking fine should be doubled the average New Yorker. Imagine a parking fine system based on income, not the actual fine. I find that kind of ridiculous. About as ridiculous as Joe Biden sending 1,500 troops to the border as Title 42 is set to expire. They are expecting a major surge of illegal immigrants crossing the border. Hey, President Biden, instead of investing 1,500 troops, why not just keep Title 42 in place? Just a thought here on this Tuesday. But I wanted to get to this. Yeah, the Rangers are out, and it was a pretty bad loss last night. But made some nice friends in the Ranger community, Twitter community. But there's this story I've been meaning to get to, okay? And I kind of question sometimes what this whole council is doing as far as if they're doing right by New Yorkers or not. But I gotta say, the story about how they want to double parking fines based on income is quite ridiculous. Let me get you the story in the Daily News. By the way, I had to get the print version of it because online the Daily News did not let you see some of these stories unless you're subscribed. A bill introduced to the City Council last Thursday would create a new sliding scale fine structure under which low-income New Yorkers would pay less than their high-income neighbors for civil transgressions of double parking. First of all, no one is ever going to be deterred from double parking. It happens all the time. I complain about it here down on Wall Street. You've got one lane for all these different cars, buses, vans, trucks, you name it. And if someone's clogging up that one lane, traffic is backed up to beyond City Hall. So I've talked about that gripe before. But this gripe is a whole new gripe because here's the deal. Shouldn't a fine just be a fine? Meaning, if it's $100 fine, that's the fine. You know, like in Seinfeld, that's the meal, Banya. That's the fine. Now we're saying, hey, guess what? Because according to, I couldn't believe this study, the Independent Budget Office of New York State, the city has not collected on more than $2 billion of tickets issued over the past 5 years. Some might say that's a drop in the bucket. I say that's a lot of money. I say, what are they doing? Who's asleep at the wheel? Pun intended, right? But I also say, to make up for this, you're not going to say no fine is the same. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then Justin Brennan says, why should the guy who double parked his 1988 Toyota pay the same as the guy with the 2024 Bentley? I don't know, because a fine is a fine. And do you want to scare high-income earners away from New York even more? You fine them more than the average New Yorker, they're going to feel singled out. More, as much as they already do, they're going to feel singled out. So I think, Councilman Brannon, to keep New York City having the high-income earners, you don't do this system. According to the Daily News, Chris Sommerfeld, there are programs already in use in some European countries, including Sweden, Germany, and France. U.S. municipalities, including Bridgeport, Connecticut, Milwaukee, and Maricopa County, Arizona, we know their elections can't get right? Have launched pilot programs, and this program was also started or attempted on Staten Island in the 1980s. Brannon goes on to say, instead of bankrupting working people while winking at the rich by setting the same fines for everyone, fines should be high enough to discourage people from breaking laws that endanger or inconvenience our neighbors. Great. But low enough that they don't arbitrarily upend anyone's life. Now, I just think the rich want to be treated, and the high income earners want to be treated like a regular New Yorker because they are New Yorkers. And the fact that they're getting singled out is the reason why they're leaving this beautiful city we call New York. And I want to pick apart this one line. He says, we want to discourage people from breaking laws that endanger or inconvenience our neighbors. Really? Is that why bail reform is so lax here that people are just shoplifting and closing down, grocery chains and convenience stores and places like Rite Aid and CVS are forced to close or, make sure their personal items are protected because, hey, guess what? You're being shoplifted. I love that he and D.A. Bragg said, basically, we're not going to tolerate attempts on violating the law of New York. That's why Alvin Bragg has reduced felonies to misdemeanors, 52 of them, right? That's why Justin Brannon wants to, make this more stringent to deter. But I want to know where the city council's focus is on the fact that these stores are being shoplifted. I want to know if the city council really wants to uphold the law in New York and not do a targeting thing here. Because in my view, it just looks like a political tax the rich kind of moment. Tax the high income earner moment. Instead of buckling down to keep everybody safe, we're going to say now fines. Let's double the parking fines for those who make more than the average New Yorker. I don't think it should work like that here. Because I don't think you're going to keep people in New York if you single them out for how much they make. And as Cranes reported, the whole idea that $300,000 is like $100,000 here in New York is kind of a dramatic article and a dramatic statement. But with taxes and high rents and everything, I could see it. So now, in addition to the high rents, in addition to high taxes, hey, parking fines, we're going to double that if you're a high-income earner. And it feels like a wrong bone to pick in this city. And I'm a Libra, so I hate unevenness. And I just think if you're not going to treat one sector of society as the other, you're going to lose that sector. And by the way, that sector happens to be the high income earners that are literally bankrolling the city because they can afford these outrageous things that you talk about. But imagine doubling the fine based on income. Imagine changing the fine scale and trying to collect back $2 billion. Well, why aren't you asking the regular people who didn't pay the fines to do so? Why don't you ask the average Joe that might be fined for the money? What's wrong with that? The idea that forgiveness is happening by excusing middle-income, low-income earners from paying their way and saying this is the rich's problem isn't going to work either. Because what you're going to say is, all right, everybody's going to be like a trust fund baby then, right? If they're being bankrolled by the rich, then they're going to be the trust fund baby. They're not going to be a functioning human being who has to be responsible. I have a damn credit line that I try and pay down often with PayPal. I'm not afraid to say it because I want to grow. I want to be an adult. I want to move along in life, and I'm working to pay it off. I'm not asking someone to pay it off for me because I don't believe in that. I believe in paying my way. Now, somebody say, well, you got so many free things back in the day. How could you say that? Well, some of those opportunities did happen. But as an adult, I found that paying your way and paying your medical bills and making sure your responsibilities are met are so much more valuable than asking someone else to pay. To pay. And that is where people are, instead of paying, now breaking windows. And, I was liking what Seattle did when they said, hey, businesses, we're going to pay you back for the broken windows policies that happened during the Summer of Love in Chaz. I wish New York City would do the same thing to all the businesses that had to board up, that had to reinvent themselves, if you will, after the riots broke windows here in New York. But instead, we were getting protesters that were being paid. We were getting protesters paid for breaking the windows. Isn't that backwards? I think it's backwards. We're not thanking the businesses for staying strong and being through and through. We're saying, hey, protesters, sorry for whatever the NYPD did. And I'm not excusing their behavior because some of it was bad during the protests. But I'm saying to pay thousands of dollars to people that literally, maybe the peaceful protesters were wrongfully attacked. But this feels like an overall thing, including the rioters. And that's not good. So start making people pay their way again. Make businesses feel welcome again in New York. And don't scare away the high-income earners, Justin Brennan. Just don't. Okay? That's the last thing we need. Is to make people feel like they're being chased away or targeted or double fined because they're making more than someone else. I don't like it. I don't think it's good for the city. I think the city council should be focusing on way more issues than that. And it's just an example of where we're going. We're excusing those from making payments of $2 billion collectively by saying, okay, the rich will pay it now. That's not how society should work. Everybody should pay their way. That is the dignified way, and everybody should be encouraged to pay their way. And I'm going to get off my soapbox now, but I just got to get this out. I had to riff a little bit. Also, did you see that the gun violence law that Kathy Hochul wants to put in the budget, $337 million to include police officers and social workers and the like around New York State? She slipped in a $337 million package that might just be part of this $229 billion budget. Is that right or wrong? Email me, alex@alexgnyc.com, alex@alexgnyc.com. Links to the stories I mentioned and more in the description below. And please continue to listen. We have some big guests coming up this week. You don't want to miss it on the Alex Garrett Podcast Network.